May 10th, Town of Avon. Okay, welcome to the Town of Avon Advisory Plan Commission meeting. If you are interested in having a copy of the agenda or the staff reports, they are available on the tables to the right of the audience. We will be conducting business as outlined on the agenda. From time to time, the board may deviate from the agenda. As president of this body, I will inform those in attendance of any deviations. This meeting is being recorded for the public record. Because of this, we request that all personal conversations are kept to a minimum and that all cell phones are set to vibrate with any phone calls taken outside of the chambers. If you are interested in commenting during the public hearing, please sign up on the sheets located to the tables to the right of the audience. When your name is called, please step forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Please address your comments to the board and not to the staff or to the petitioner. Your comments should relate directly to the case at hand. Responses to public comments will be given once the hearing is closed. We do understand that there may be several persons who wish to speak. In order to keep the meeting running in a timely fashion, we request that you not repeat previous comments. Thank you for your assistance in facilitating a respectful, fair, and timely meeting. Again, welcome to our meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Catherine Ransberg.
Present.
Paul Guckenberger.
Here.
Bill Reed.
Here.
Grant Niemeyer.
Here.
Sam Duvall.
Here.
James Petratus.
Here.
And Charles Bischoff.
Here. So we have a quorum.
Yep.
So at this point, a couple things. We're going to give a notice for any of those that are online that wish to comment on the town online. So if so, please send any responses or questions you have for the comments on the public hearing for DPR 21-01 Costco Warehouse. Please do that now because we'll have a conversation about that later after we get through some other items on the agenda. At this point, I'm going to open it up for public comments. The public may comment on any items not on the agenda. So does anyone here like to speak about anything not on the agenda?
And Jim, just to backtrack for a second, but I don't believe they can make public comments until the public hearing is open. And you're asking them to put comments in already. They can't make public comments until the public portion has been opened.
But I have to give them a 2-minute.
Yes, you have to give them a 2-minute warning. Yeah,
So
but,
we're going to get to that. We're at that now.
okay. I just want to make sure
So, yes,
that the
we're at
public is,
portion of it now. So anything they have on public comments, I need now. And anything they're going to comment about later when we get to the public hearing, this is their 2-minute warning. Will be that in 2 minutes or
Okay.
in a few minutes anyway. So I'm trying to make sure they get to that quickly so we have that in a timely manner.
okay,
If that makes sense.
sure.
I should have my microphone on. Okay, so would anybody here like to comment? Or is anybody signed up to comment?
No one signed up to comment.
Okay, well, I opened it up for public comments opening up a couple comments at 6:33. So we have a little bit of time for any public comments at this point online. So at this point, I have 6:35. Has anyone commented online?
No, we are having some internet issues, just FYI, but nothing has come through so far. Internet dropped out the last 15 seconds of that time.
Are we back up online now?
It appears so.
So we're back online and nothing there?
Nothing has showed up anywhere.
Okay, so at this point, at 6:36, I'm going to close the hearing to public comments. So under old business, we have DPR 21-01 Costco Warehouse. Bill, if you want to give us your staff report, please.
That's DPR 2101 Costco Warehouse, a request for approval of a waiver of section 23-183A to allow an approximately 160,000 square foot commercial building to be constructed without the required articulation. This is a request for approval for a waiver of the articulation requirements contained within section 23 of our ordinance, specifically in the US 36 Highway Overlay District. On March 22nd of this year, the Plan Commission has already heard and approved the request to develop this property with a proposed retail building. That original request included 6 waivers of the requirements of the zoning ordinance, and the Plan Commission approved 4 of those waivers, but denied 2. The request to decrease the masonry requirements of the west and north facades, and the request to eliminate the articulation as required. Subsequent to that hearing, the petitioner did a redesign of the building, and they have submitted new elevations. That new proposal does meet the requirements for masonry, and so that waiver is no longer required. And it does incorporate some articulation into the facades. So the depth and the breadth of that articulation do not necessarily comply with the strict application of the ordinance. The staff does recommend approval of the waiver. We believe that the articulation or the elevations they submitted meet substantially the intent of the zoning ordinance. And the Plan Commission merely has to act on the waiver in this one. They have already acted upon the development plan. It's already been approved. With that, we do recommend approval of the waiver, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So for the audience that's here and for the online audience, the articulation ordinance, the articulation part of the ordinance in reality is to basically set an aesthetic view to prevent one singular line aesthetically.
Right.
It serves no functional purpose, correct?
It's to break up an extended. It's to break up an extended plane along a building. In this case, I believe it's greater than 60 feet in length. So if a plane of a building is greater than 60 feet in length, it's supposed to have a projection or a recess of about 3 feet and then extend for about, I think, 40 feet. At 20 feet, and then recess back or project forward again. So the intent is to break it up and give a more interesting aesthetic view to it.
Thank you. I apologize for my mic not being on. In reality, I was trying to save someone's ears. That's my story. I'm sorry, Mr. Bishop.
And Bill,
Questions for staff?
one quick question. Bill, the only request from the petitioner is not the spacing of the articulation, but the depth of the articulation, correct?
Yeah, the articulation that they've proposed doesn't go all the way up the full facade, and it also is only projecting 1 foot from the built facade rather than the 3 required by the ordinance.
It doesn't go all the way up?
It doesn't go up to the top. It only goes about halfway up the building.
And that's not necessarily even defined within our.
No, it's not. That's an interpretation issue. We've interpreted the ordinance to mean that articulation should go all the way to the roof line. But it's not specifically said in the ordinance.
Other questions? Other questions for staff? No? All All right, in that case, the petitioner could please come forward and present your case, please.
Good evening. My name is Steve Cross, and I'm the Costco Development Manager. And so I'm here before you tonight to represent Costco for this waiver request that we've come before you.
Before you begin, can you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Stephen Cross, and I'm at 1955 Raymond Drive, Northbrook, Illinois, 60062.
Thank you.
So with me tonight, I have Risa Yuki, who's our architect. She's out in Seattle right now, so she's online, logged in here, listening, hopefully able to, eventually she'll provide some presentation for the architecture. And then we also have Jerry Kriegs from our office staff as well online. First of all, I wanted to thank the commission for allowing us to have this special meeting here to present the modifications to our waiver. As Bill mentioned, we were before you back in March with a number of other waivers, and there were 2 waivers that were denied at that point. So we've worked really hard since then to come up with what we think is a revised architecture that really meets the intent of the code, the articulation code. So we've worked really hard on that, and we really appreciate commissioners taking the time out of their evening to have this special meeting, which will allow us to hopefully meet our schedule. We're really looking forward to getting this building under construction, hopefully, and opening still this year. So it's very critical from a timing standpoint. So we, again, I appreciate that. So I was at the last meeting, I presented at the last meeting, and I know there was a little bit of a snafu in presentation of the drawings and having a package in front of you, so I apologize for that. So what we did was after the meeting, we took your comments, which were very clearly stated with the 2 denials. The one was the masonry and the second was the articulation. The masonry was certainly a lot easier issue to resolve. It was fairly straightforward in terms of adding the required masonry along the west and north facades of the building. We had originally proposed less masonry because we had beefed up the landscaping along those 2 sides. So we maintained the landscaping buffer, the extra buffer in the landscaping, and we added the masonry there. So that waiver essentially just kind of went away at that point. But we really did struggle with the articulation, and unfortunately we didn't express that to the extent we needed to in terms of the challenges with designing the articulation with a building of this size and configuration. So what we did was we took your comments to heart. We went back and we challenged our architect, Risa, and we said, all right, we need to try to incorporate to the extent that we can these articulation requirements. And you mentioned the spacing of them, the number of them, the width of them, and the projection of them. So there's certain things around the building which made that challenging. Now, whether that's the loading dock on the north side, and mechanical equipment, transformers, and on the south facade we had the tire center, the doors to the tire center. We have a sidewalk along that face of the building, so that makes that one challenging. So there were some reasons that we didn't incorporate to that extent the articulation that was originally in the code. So what we did was as I said, we took a close look at it. We challenged our architect, and Risa is going to be explaining in more detail what she did as far as trying to meet that. And I think at the end of the day, we've really beefed up the building in the sense, the look of it, the quality of it, and what you see. And I think it meets the intent, albeit, as Bill mentioned, what I look at as more of a minor variation here, a minor waiver, is the articulation depth as far as it comes out from the building. 3 feet, instead of that, we've projected out 1 foot. That allows us to keep the landscape buffers that we have, because if we started doing these projections that stuck out even further, we would actually have to move the building into the landscape buffer, still complying with the buffer requirement, but shrinking it down somewhat, which would shrink down the landscaping. So that's why we kind of lean towards modifying the projections somewhat, which, given the distances that you see the building from the adjacent properties, we felt that would be a reasonable accommodation given the landscaping that we were providing and the buffering setback there. So what I'd like to do then is just, because I'm a non-engineer, I'm a non-architect, I'm an engineer, I'd like to turn this over to Risa so she can just kind of walk you through the changes and explain the rationale of how we took the front entry and kind of wrapped it around the building. It really came up what we think is a real nice compromise here. So is Risa on the line?
Yes, can you hear me? And can you hear me, Steve?
Yeah, we can hear you. Just speak loud.
Okay, I'll speak loud. It's not coming through my
Can
headset.
we see you? Can we, hang on just a, sorry, we can't see you. Hang on just a second, please.
Okay.
Jared, can you do the visual part?
So are we going to be using this PowerPoint, or is she going to be using her PowerPoint?
She's going to be using her power. If you could put her screen up, it'll be easier because then she'll be pointing to the elements as she talks about them. There you go. There's Risa.
Let me find my-
You got lots of Risas.
Thank you, Jared.
Okay, I had turned my video off because my screen was flickering. Is it doing that pretty badly? Or
It's flickering a little bit, but it looks okay to me, I think. If everybody's okay with it.
okay, hopefully I'm the small picture, not the large picture. So.
Yes, if you could speak up or
Okay.
if you could speak up, please, that would be helpful.
Okay.
She could log out and log back in. That's the best thing she could do.
Say it again. You know what? Let me try one thing.
Okay, so we're having a hard time hearing you, so if you could log out, please log back in, that'd be
Can you hear me
helpful
now?
for your presentation. And I know that's going to take a minute or two, but while you're doing that, I will ask Mitchell Ray to comment on what our options are and just briefly go into what we're doing here tonight.
Yeah, so the DPR has already been established, and so we're really just deciding on the waiver, which you have the discretion on, the staff reports list, the factors that you can take into consideration, and when determining if that waiver is something the Plan Commission wants to entertain. If it is, then it will just be attached to the already approved DPR, and the petitioner will just be able to move forward with the development in that manner.
Thank you, Mr. Ray.
You're welcome.
And we'll give her a few moments to.
Sorry, can you hear me any better? Steve, can you hear me any better?
Not too much, but can you just speak louder?
Yeah, I can, but I'm just going to turn my screen off so I can lean forward.
Yeah, you just have to keep speaking loud because it's very hard. It fades away as you're talking.
She can also
Okay.
use the audio output on her end. If this is a Zoom connection, she goes to audio, she goes to settings.
It's not a Zoom connection.
It's not a Zoom?
It is not.
Never mind.
Sorry, Risa.
Does that get any better?
It's a hair. That's a hair better.
I'll remind you if the volume drops.
Okay. Am I sharing a screen?
That's much better, much better.
Okay. Am I sharing a screen? Not yet?
Not yet. We don't see it yet.
Now you're sharing a screen.
Okay, fantastic. Let me know if I start fading off. Okay, the screen I have, I guess the plan I have up on the screen right now is our updated elevations. And what we're presenting here is that, you know, as Stephen had mentioned, is that we do meet the masonry requirements. So on the east elevation, the west elevation, and the north elevation, we meet the 50% masonry structural brick. And on the south elevation, we are meeting the 80%. Okay. And so I'm going to flip to a couple screens. Okay, I just wanted to also present this set of elevations to present that, you know, our articulation spacing is meeting the minimum of the 40-foot spacing between articulation elements. So I'm just pointing to these here. Okay. So as we had presented in the original meeting, the one of our main design features is at our entry canopy, where we have these sectional glass doors, and to where we have detailed some soldier coursing and other details to help, you know, create something that's a little bit more visually pleasing at a pedestrian level. And from that, we had created these we had mimicked these, you know, these glazing areas with these inset panels. And originally we had them shown kind of in this area and then also in this area to kind of help lengthen this whole canopy side, as well as kind of tie into the tire center. So when we were asked to relook at the articulation, one of the components that we felt was one of the strongest was this element here, this recessed element. And as Steve had mentioned, these recessed elements do project 1 foot spacing. The base masonry along the building, this is the west elevation, along the building is 11 foot 4 inches. And then what we've done is these recessed elements go up to the height of 18.8 to the bottom of the accent band. So in order to make sure that we maintain the cohesiveness of the design and not, you know, create two-sided architecture, but to fulfill that that four-sided architecture, we brought these elements all across the west elevation, as well as to the north elevation, being sensitive to the more mechanical and operational needs of the warehouse. And then when we took a look at the west elevation, we had realized that the west elevation as well as the north elevation had also incorporated kind of bi-coloring of the embossed architectural metal panel, and therefore on the east elevation we also brought that element over to create a little bit of cohesiveness throughout the elevation. So I'll go ahead and show some perspectives where you can see the depth a little bit better. Okay. So this is at the entry canopy, and this is the south side of the 80% structural brick. So this is the pop-out element. So the foot still creates some really good shadowing and texture across the elevation. Okay. Here we've incorporated the element underneath the sign panel. This is the east facade. So here you can see that we've carried that across the east facade, but also have been able to incorporate it within the loading dock. This is from a view from the southwest corner of the building along the west elevation. And I think this view does shows this pretty well, showing that, you know, it's not only creating a horizontal but also a vertical articulation across the building, where this is a little bit easier to do on this side versus the other sides where we have the higher masonry element to make up that 50%. Okay. All right. Steve, should I go ahead and pass it back?
Okay. So essentially, as
If I could interrupt you for just a second.
yes.
So I just want to give notice now that I anticipate opening up for public comment in about 2 minutes. So if anyone would like to speak, yeah, this is your 2-minute warning, more or less. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. So just to reiterate, in terms of what we've done is, you know, as Risa said, we tried to incorporate the articulation intent in terms of breaking up that facade, given the length of the building and the width of the building there. And rather than just trying to do a very sort of rigid which I've seen on some of the other buildings where it's just this element just bumps out 3 feet and goes ground to the roof, and that's it. And it's every 40 feet, you have this little bump out. Without any perhaps changes in color, it really is just an articulation. What we've done here, as you can see, we've tried to incorporate the elements of the materials, bump outs, and the coloring to create that interesting facade on each of the different elevations there. So again, just to sum up, I mean, we've created what is a very attractive building that we think would, the town would be very proud of having that building as well as Costco is. So we respectfully, request the positive recommendation for these waivers that we're requesting here. Open for questions.
Questions for petitioner? Yes.
Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
I would like to just comment that I really greatly appreciate that you presented us with 3 perspective plans, which included your initial proposal, the proposal that you are presenting this evening, as well as a fully compliant proposal. I think that was very considerate of you and was
Thanks. But on the proposed design that you have, if you can pull up the corner shot again. Yeah, like that one right there. Between the metal siding and the brick, is that flush all the way across, or is there an actual articulation or depth there?
There's probably about 1.5 inches depth here.
1.5 inches?
Yeah, yes,
So that's just the thickness of the material on the same framed wall?
correct.
Okay, and then it also appears that you have a height difference going along the building between the gray and the tan metal. Is that actually accurate?
Yes, there's a step here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then between the 2 different colored sidings, is that flush as well?
Yes, this is flush as well.
Okay. So the only articulation are these little picture frames around what could be doorways. I'm not sure what you want to call them. Because you're only on each elevation, you're only calling out one, and then you got typical, but we don't have that definition of what's typical. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on what's actually getting articulated here. And is it each of these doorway entry type looking things?
Yes, that's correct. It's these recessed elements, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions, petitioner? Okay, in that case, at 6:59, we'll open this up for public hearing. Has anyone signed up to speak?
No, no one signed up to speak.
Jared, do we have anybody online that has commented?
Only comment is on the echo, really bad echo.
So I can't blame the petitioner for that, so I'm going with Jared on that one. Suzanne's not here, we can blame her.
Agreed.
In that case, if nobody's commented, I would like to close the public hearing at 7 o'clock. So any other questions for petitioner? Hearing none, would anyone care to make a motion on the waiver?
I did want to bring up to the commission.
I'm sorry.
What I always like to look at when they're requesting a change in standards. I mean, the standard here is 3 foot. The standard here is 3 foot. They're asking for a foot, so they're asking for a 60. I always like to look at the percentages. So they're asking for a 66% reduction from the standard. So I think that deserves a little bit of debate on if Do we feel that that's justified on this type of building perhaps, given the size of it? I mean, is there safety factors that we need to take into consideration on that much of a reduction? Is it going to hurt the architectural, what we're trying to accomplish with the comprehensive plan? So when it comes to these types of requests from a petitioner, I always like to look at the percentage to put more of a real life type of perspective on how much are they asking us to do in these certain situations.
I agree with that. I think that whenever we're looking at a significant waiver, there should be discussion. I do appreciate the fact that there was originally 2 waivers being requested, and now we are down to 1 and
Less than 1.
less than 1. Yeah, like the compliance is now that basically 1 1/3. Because I understand correctly that these are purely aesthetic, have nothing to do with structure, correct?
That's absolutely correct, yeah. The building interior is straight walls, and that cannot be varied, yeah.
And this is a building that is going to have a significant amount of landscaping on at least 2 sides, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So to me, since this is strictly an aesthetic that we're going for, because this isn't an aesthetic on at least 2 sides that is really going to be very visible, I am more inclined to agree with the compromise or with the waiver, as opposed to if this was a building where this was going to be, these sides were all going to be very prominently seen, because they aren't, but they're still working within our plan. I find that it is substantially compliant, especially considering that they've added all of the masonry. And I mean, I will say aesthetically, I do appreciate the compliant design much better, but I know that there's been great effort that has gone into the proposal that you have presented to us, and that, unlike some petitioners, you've actually taken what we said and went back to the drawing board. So I think if we're looking at, and these all have to be looked at from a case-by-case basis, I think in this particular case that the waiver request is reasonable.
I guess this is a question for Bill, perhaps. Is this ordinance designed to improve the aesthetic of the building from a mile away or from someone sitting in the parking lot?
Well, I think
Because that kind of determines what you're saying is the landscaping, but the landscaping doesn't matter if you're on this side of the landscaping.
Well, I think it's probably both. I mean, it's intended to have an attractive building that's not monotonous. And so if you're looking at it from the parking lot or looking at it from, well, maybe not a mile away, but, maybe a quarter mile away or 1/8 of a mile away as you would from 36, it's intended to be attractive and non-monotonous from both locations.
I think this is a significant improvement from the initial design. It's still a little bit repetitive. I disagree with Catherine there that I think the compliant design is almost as bad as the initial design, as it gives us our 3 feet bump outs, but it's exactly 3 feet every so many feet. There's no variation to it. So it gives you a straight line again. Whereas this breaks it up a little bit more, showcases the difference in the material breaking from the metal to the brick, with those height changes.
But again, it's strictly, it just goes to show the difference in aesthetic appeal, and that's basically what we're talking about here, is we're not talking, I don't see there being a safety issue. In fact, the compliant design with the 3-foot bump outs, to me, those are creating little nooks and crannies where if somebody was intent on doing harm to another person, creates a space where they could hide the 3 feet, the 3-foot bump outs. So to me, that almost works against the against denying the waiver because the 1 foot bump out creates a much smaller space and creates more visibility, at least from a security and safety standpoint, whether someone was trying to enter the loading docks or going into or looking at, doing harm to another individual.
I had that exact same thought, Catherine. And I completely agree with you. This is all for the aesthetics. And yes, 3 sides of the building, well, 2.5 sides of the building are, 1 foot, probably no big deal whatsoever. It gets the point across architecturally and aesthetically pleasing. My concern is, and I want to bring it to everyone's attention, is the entrance though. That is what should be most aesthetically pleasing, right? Because that's what you're focusing on. So a quick question for the architect, Riza.
Yes.
The upper portion of the entrance, what is the articulation up there?
Within this space here.
Yep.
So we have the embossed architectural panel here, and this is all smooth. And then what we've done is to emphasize the doors. We've popped forward the 2 tall columns, and then we've incorporated an architectural rib metal panel above the actual slider doors, the entry-exit slider doors.
What are all the depths that you have built in there? The glass, what's the depth there?
This is approximate. I don't have the exact depth, but it's probably about 3 feet or so, three or a little bit more feet in depth.
Okay, then above the main entrance doors surrounding the Costco sign, the upper half, what's the depth on that articulation?
This is about 8 inches.
On the outside of it?
Oh, here? I want to say probably 18 inches.
18
A little more
inches?
than a foot. Yeah, a little more than a foot.
That portion of the building hasn't changed, has it? In the design?
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
That entrance portion of the building has not had a change, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We have not changed the entrance.
So the only change would be on the north end of the building of that side? The north end of the east side?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
But it would have to change though, Catherine, because if it's in the compliant, that would be 3 foot on the upper portion. That's why I'm trying to concentrate on just the main entrance here.
Okay.
That if they are in compliance, that would be 3 feet up top.
So what?
They're at 18 inches, which is almost 2 foot now. 1.5 feet.
So what you're saying is that,
Should we adhere to the comprehensive plan for the entrance for the most aesthetically part
Okay.
of the building?
so you would like so there have been no changes made, if I'm understanding correctly, no changes made from the initial design to what is being presented in the compliant design, which your statement is that it actually is not compliant?
No, in the compliant, if it is compliant, that is a 3 foot depth.
Well, if I could just, sorry, if I could interrupt, if that's okay, just to say, we struggle with how to call that because it says strict code study, and I guess I didn't want to give the impression that that was fully compliant
Okay.
because there were some variations that even in that design, we couldn't comply with. So the intent of that study was to show you the articulation of 3 foot every 40 feet with 20-foot lengths, was to show how that could be implemented wherever it could be around the building. So of course, the entryway, we based on the design that we have and getting that 3 foot bump out there, that's not shown in there. And then the other place where we struggled with not being able to get the 3 foot to comply with it is along the tire center, because that's got certain door dimensions. So when you base it on the door dimensions, you can't fit it into that numerical 40-foot spacing. So we had an issue there. And then even on the loading dock, if you look, when you back up into the loading dock, there's the wall just to the side of the loading dock. You can't do it. It's longer than 40 feet, but you can't do a 3 foot projection because you'll be projecting into the loading dock.
Right.
The truck is backing into. So now you've got to change the entire building footprint. So I apologize if that was the kind of the impression. That was a 100% strict requirement. It wasn't. We would still have needed some kind of waivers on that.
So just to make sure we understand, there's been no change made from your initial design to anything you've presented here with regards to the entrance portion of the building?
Correct, that's correct. Because we felt that when we looked at holistically of the whole building, that blended in with the rest of what we were looking for. So we chose not to make any changes to that part of the building because, again, if we start doing 3-foot bump outs, we were starting to push the building. And the building would go into that rear service area because another reason for not putting 3-foot bump outs along the rear service drive is you'd have trucks driving along there. And now instead of having, we felt that the 1-foot bump out wouldn't impact the truck traffic. But if we had 3-foot bump outs, now you got to start putting bollards at every corner of every building.
Right. Well, now that, I actually don't have a problem if we stick strictly to the entrance, if we talk about the entrance, if we're assuming that, obviously you've given a very rational reason for why we don't want to bump out on that area by the tire center or the loading docks, because it interferes with trucks being able to come in and unload their, that makes sense. But if we're just going to stick strictly to talking about the entrance, Bill, are you suggesting that the bump out that frames the Costco wholesale, you would like to see it be 3 feet, or we need to simply, it's right now, it's at about half that?
I'm going to refer back to my original question on where do we feel comfortable on allowing our standards to be reduced for the aesthetics of the entrance to this building?
So if I can jump in and make a comment. So I think that that I appreciate that they've met our masonry requirement, because that's the one thing that we seem to always see is that people don't want to adhere to that ordinance of meeting that. So I appreciate that you've met that. As far as the proposed design goes for the articulation all around the building and the change in the building materials, I think this is actually a better design than our ordinance. Definitely from what was initially proposed, because you get that same articulation definition around the entire building. And you get the masonry all the way around the entire building, as well as you get the different colors and the metal panels there. So I actually feel like the new proposed design, it doesn't entirely meet our ordinance, but it meets the intent of the ordinance of providing some articulation and aesthetic appeal there, as well as maintaining the landscape buffer.
And to your point about the glazing, I was just kind of remembering the conversations I had with Risa. In terms of the glazing, Risa mentioned that glazing for those roll-up doors, they are set back more than 3 feet. So we did look at that as being the 3-foot projection, even though it doesn't go all the way up to the roof line. It was kind of part and parcel of the articulation. So that was kind of another reason why we didn't really want to touch that. We wanted to kind of keep that as it was and then just carry the design around the building.
And the only other reason I bring it up is because there is no notes on this area at all on articulation.
Right.
So just back to my original question for the board, how much does everybody feel like, if it is actually 18 inches and we make comment to that, is everyone comfortable with 18 inches being the articulation in that particular area? Because I feel like more is better when it comes to the entrance.
To the entrance?
To the entrance.
When I look down below, the bottom part has the 3 feet.
Yeah, the bottom part is 3 feet. I'm just talking about.
Although the top does not at 18 inches.
Yep.
To me, that actually gives you a different breakup, but that's me aesthetics. So my aesthetics may not meet the next person's aesthetics. So I might like that painting, you might like that painting.
I know, that's why I'm just posing the question to the board. I
thing.
just want
So,
everybody to take a look at how much they want to bend from standards.
Okay. It's up to you guys.
I feel like it looks very balanced. I feel like the proposed design looks very balanced in the front. If we were, I don't know, I'm not an architect, don't even play one on TV, but if what we're called, I guess I would refer to as the pillars on either side of the Costco wholesale sign would be bumped out another 18 inches, is that going to create structural or design problems for you guys?
I guess the short answer would be yes, that would. This is the prototypical design, and we've had added the enhancements around the building, so there certainly is a standard that we go with, but then localities have their variances. Some, we can go all metal buildings, and obviously this is at the higher end, obviously, at this point in time. To bump those out even more, that changes a whole lot of things. It's not just adding another 18 inches to it.
For instance, like it would change the pylons or bumpers or whatever those are called, those would have to be moved out too as well?
Those could possibly have to be moved out as well, yes. So now you're going to end up with about a 4 to 5 foot bump out from the doors, the slide up doors there. So I think just from a scale perspective, that the base of that starts to look massive. I think, I think the comment was made that it's more than 3 feet down at pedestrian level, and what we're talking about is 18 inches well above head height. So visually, I'm not sure what that's achieving there, but it certainly would create a lot of problems trying to do that now.
If we want to get that Costco entrance to stand out more, and we have more than 3 feet of recess on either side, do we want to consider eating into some of that 3 feet and get 2.5 feet of setback there, if that presents the appearance of Costco standing out closer to 3 feet?
In my view, the new design meets the intent of the ordinance. That would be my interpretation, but that's me.
I think it's a significant improvement.
Is the petitioner committing to that 18 inches above the entrance there?
I'll commit to what Risa says she's got to design that. If that's what it's at,
Okay.
I'll commit to that.
So what are you asking? I'm not sure.
No, that was it. I just wanted to know what, because I mean, there's very little notes and it just says typical. So I mean, and they're asking for a waiver on all articulation, but yet there's a lot of information still missing, so.
So from what I hear, it would have been nice to have had some drawings.
Oh, that would have been great for me.
So a drawing here, although there are other different images, a drawing would have helped us to review this a little more in depth.
Especially when it comes to articulation with dimensions and whatnot. Reese's probably gonna be able to tell what I am here, but after this, but I always think architectural drawings are fluff pieces, so.
Well, I think you have to remember the way these are built in 3D now, as opposed to the old way of drafting. Changing. You get to final design. I mean,
Yeah.
design these in 3D, so they're
Oh,
pretty much the way it's going to be.
Very true. It is.
Other questions, comments?
Can I just ask a
Anyone care to make a
clarification?
motion? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, just a clarification question. So 18 inches here, but we can maintain the 4 inches on the inset. Is that correct? I just want to
Yeah,
make sure that.
the interior was not my concern. It was just the exterior.
This part. Okay, thank you.
I wanted to bring up one other thing because it kind of came up too, was the interpretation of height articulation. And I just wanted to say what since they're showing us the difference between our height articulation from their compliant design to what they actually proposed. When we do the Unified Development Ordinance, I think we probably need to put a height in there and just say, I think what they proposed looks a lot better than what is compliant or with our ordinances. So I just wanted to make that
So at
comment.
some
for
point,
Bill.
we need to revisit the articulation part of the ordinance.
Yeah, when the UDO comes up and they start finalizing that, and obviously some kind of height probably needs to be in there. If it's a percentage, probably works better, but yeah, if they stayed with what our code is right now, I don't think that looks as good for sure.
Interesting enough, we're actually working on another project in Ohio that's got very similar architectural standards, just that articulation and 40 feet. It's almost like they might have copied it from you. But what they actually did was there's another sentence that allows for architectural design to kind of trump that articulation. So if one come up with a design that everybody looks at and goes, well, I like this design. Forgetting about the standards, you've incorporated what the intent of this code is, but you've done it in a way that kind of doesn't meet the code, but it meets the intent. That's the way, and we presented that to the staff there, and they loved the building. I think that code is lacking here. It's a very rigid, and that's what I beat Bill up over this a couple of times after the last. What can we do? How can we vary it? And he said, none. You can't vary it unless you get a waiver. That was the challenge that we had coming back to you was, as I said, even in the kind of the strict code study, what we needed one section of the building because there was no deviations allowed. That's just my 2 cents worth on that.
Other questions or comments? Would anyone care to make a motion on the waiver?
Make a motion. I move we approve DPR 2101 Costco Warehouse, a request for a waiver of section 2318 3A to allow the construction of a building without the required articulation.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion or comments? Mitchell, was that sufficient? Mr. Ray?
It was. Can you just repeat who made the second? It was a little hard to distinguish.
Grant made the second.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a motion. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Four.
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 Four. Four. Okay, the waiver passed. In that case, we are done at this point. So
Great. Thank you very much. We appreciate your
Thank you
time
for
and
your
look
efforts.
forward to opening the warehouse.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion, we adjourn.
All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.